In this video, we'll talk about freeze panes. So freeze pane can be located in view and freeze panes. So the first sheet we have is freeze first column. It says freeze the first column so that the data in the first column is visible even with scrolling. So only the first column, column A. So let's go ahead, view, freeze panes, and look at all the options. So there are three options. One says freeze pane, so more like we decide which panes. Then there is top row and freeze first column. So in this case, we can just click on freeze first column. It should freeze the first column for us. And just to show you what happens, if I'm scrolling, you'll see that the first column is visible all throughout, even if we have scrolled a lot to the right. Okay, let's go to the next worksheet. It's freeze top row. It says freeze top row so that the data in top row is visible even with scrolling. Okay, so I'll use the view, freeze panes, and there's a standard option for freeze top row. We hit that. Our top row is this instruction. So if I'm scrolling down, you will see the data is changing. We keep going down, but the first row is still visible. Let's go to the next one. It says freeze rows. So in this case, I want freeze top two rows in the worksheet. Okay, so if I go to freeze panes and I have these options, none of them really say top two rows. So I have to use this option which says freeze panes. Now there's a little bit of trick to it. It says wherever you point your cursor, anything that's above it or anything that's before it in the columns will be frozen. So let's say if I point here in B3, then anything that's above it, it's two rows, and the first column will be frozen. But we don't want any columns, we only want top two rows. So I need to place my cursor in A3, so I have two rows above it, which will be frozen. I don't have any columns before this. So I'll place my cursor in A3, go to view, freeze panes, and this time I will use the first option, say freeze panes. And now let me show you as I'm scrolling down, the top two rows are not moving. Now let's go to the next worksheet. It says freeze panes. So we have to freeze panes so that the data in top two rows and the first column are always visible. So I have to freeze the top two rows and the first column. So what I would do is if I place my cursor in B3, then I have first column before it and two rows above it. So anything that's above and before will be frozen. So I will place my cursor in B3, then go freeze panes, choose the first option. And let me show you as I'm scrolling to the right, you will see my first column stays frozen. And if I'm scrolling down, the top two rows are not moving, they are frozen. Since we're talking about freezing panes, we can also unfreeze panes. The assignment doesn't talk about it, but I just want to show you. So you don't have to do it, just view. You go to freeze panes and whatever you have frozen, there will be an option to say unfreeze. If you do it, then nothing is frozen.